Greetings, my scattered sisters and brothers in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you wherever you find yourself scattered today, and that you know that his presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. Well, we are still with Jesus, and Jesus is teaching his disciples about end times. We're in Mark chapter 13, and the whole conversation got triggered when Jesus was telling the disciples that the temple was going to be destroyed, that not one stone was going to be left upon another. And the disciples wanted to know when this was going to be, what would be the signs that this was going to take place. And so Jesus starts teaching them about end times. And some of the end times that Jesus is teaching them about, it's the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. But then we've also seen that Jesus talks end times, big picture, in terms of the ultimate end time when he will return and will establish God's kingdom on the earth in all of its fullness. And so along the way, we've seen some end time principles, that end times are kind of birth pain times, that the end will come, but the end will give way to new. And so to look at end times as, okay, God's at work in these end times to bring about something new. We've also seen that in end times, you're going to be put on the spot. Are you going to be faithful to Jesus? Are you going to confess that he is Lord? Or will you deny him, and will you kind of cave in to the pressures to conform to the contemporary world, culture, whatever time it might be? And that's just the nature of end times. You're going to be put on the spot. We've also seen that end times point us towards the ultimate end, that Jesus is going to return. He is going to establish God's kingdom in its fullness. We don't know when that will be, but all of our end times that we go through point us towards that ultimate end time. Well, today we are looking at Mark chapter 13, verse 28. Jesus has a bit of an object lesson for the disciples. He teaches, verse 28, "From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near." Okay, so they know how to interpret a fig tree, that when it starts to bud and its branches are tender, summer is right at hand, it's near. Jesus goes on to say, verse 29, "So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates." Now, it's hard to know exactly how far back to go with these things, but probably has to do with the things he's talking about, the false Christ, the rumors of war, kind of the chaos. He's probably talking especially about the destruction of the temple and Jerusalem, but some would say he's talking about the ultimate end with his time. I'm not exactly sure, but let me read it again. "So also when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place." Again, a lot of confusion in terms of what does Jesus mean when he says this generation, and again, these things taking place. And some take this generation as a reference to the disciples who are right there listening to him, that they will not die before they see the destruction of the temple, the fall of Jerusalem. So that's one way it's taken. Others take it in terms of this generation would refer to the generation of all disciples, that the disciples are kind of a new generation, which we are a part of, and that this new generation of disciples will not pass away until the ultimate end, until that takes place and Jesus returns and establishes God's kingdom in all of its fullness. Jesus goes on to say, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away." That's where I want to put our focus. Yeah, there's a lot that could be debated, that could be argued in terms of this generation, what things in particular. But for me, what's most significant is that Jesus' words will not pass away. Heaven and earth will pass away. There's going to be new creation. The heavens will be made new, the earth will be made new. But Jesus' words, they're eternal. They do not pass away. And so I'm starting to think one more kind of end times principle, that as we go through end times, one of the most important things to remember is that Jesus' words do not end. They do not pass away. And so whatever our times might be, no matter how chaotic, no matter how in time they might be, we need to make sure that we live by the words of Jesus, that we continue to follow his teachings, that we take up our cross, we deny ourselves, we follow him, that we put him first, and that we follow his teachings in all that we do in these end times. And in end times, it becomes tempting to compromise, to do whatever you need to do to kind of get by, to do whatever you need to do in order to, quote unquote, survive. And no, everything's passing away, but the words of Jesus, they are eternal. And so we want to make sure as we go through our end times that in the midst of all the different words that we hear and all the different people saying you need to do this and you need to do that, now who do we really need to listen to? We need to listen to Jesus. His words are eternal. They do not pass away. So wherever you find yourself scattered today and whatever endings you might be dealing with, make sure that in the midst of the end times that you are listening to Jesus and following his words, and ask him for strength. Jesus, help me to hear you, help me to listen to you, help me to follow you, to live by your words. God bless. Have a great day. His word does not pass away.